In WWDC 2025, Apple's conference for releasing all their new products, they announced Liquid Glass, which is a completely new redesign on all their platforms and devices. As a designer, you must be very curious how to create Liquid Glass. And since Apple have not yet released their new iOS kit in Figma, today, I want to show you how to recreate that liquid glass effect so that you'll be able to apply it to any component that you like. If you're interested in staying with me till the end, I will also show you how to transform any tab bar on your iOS mobile app from how it was supposed to be originally and the way it exists right now in the iOS UI kit. We're going to transform it to what it's supposed to be according to the Apple documentation. So in order to see what we're creating, feel free to grab an image that has some kind of waviness or variation to it, just so that you can visibly see what we've created. I've used the Unsplash plugin to get this image. Start by creating any object. I will use a rectangle, so I will use the shortcut R and drag for rectangle. For my rectangle, I need a white fill, so I will select the color white, and in the opacity right here, instead of the default 100, let's set it to 1. For the purpose of seeing where we are, I'm gonna just add a stroke. We don't need this stroke to create the liquid glass effect, but just to allow us to know the boundaries of the object we're creating, I've added it. For you to grasp and remember this liquid glass effect, what you need to actually create it. Imagine dipping your head inside a pool or a body of water. I was swimming yesterday. As I'm looking inside the water without any goggles, I could see how the water was so blurry and it had a certain texture to it. And that's what created the liquid glass effect. So remember, we need blurriness and we need texture. To do that in Figma, with our rectangle selected, let's add an effect to it. So this is how you add effects. Click the plus button and let's start with that blurriness with a background blur. And you have the option to do uniform or progressive, but for the liquid glass, we need a uniform blur. I'm gonna make it maybe 10. For now. You can always manipulate that later on just to get the desired effect that you want, but between 6 to 16 is a good number. That's the first effect. Remember, blurriness. The second effect that we need is a certain texture. With the additional Figma Draw releases that happen in Config 2025, Figma has added this texture effect right here. We want to adjust the size and the radius to get the quality that we're looking for. So for the size to be significant, to give you the liquid glass effect, you need a higher number. So I'm going to go with 92. And you want to manipulate the radius. But as I'm doing this, let me move this rectangle for you just to see what's happening. We're going to raise it to something that's slightly on the higher end, so maybe a 40. You can already see that this rectangle we created is beginning to act like a piece of glass, and everything that's behind it is changing in shape. So now that we created this background that we're going to call liquid glass, we'll be able to apply it to any component that we would like. You may wonder, why did we create this separately? If we're creating a tab bar or a button, why can't we make this a layer in the background? And I'm going to show you why. Here is the button that I created previously. You will see I've added all the layers to it here. I've added a texture, a background blur. Right now, the texture is 0. If I were to add a radius to this texture, do you see how it's messing with the button and the text itself? That is not our desired effect. What we want is only for the background to change and not the content of the button. And that's why, in order to apply this to a regular button or any component, you want this particular background to be separate, to be its own quality, and then we will add it to all the components where we want to apply it. Now, let's try creating the search icon first of all. That got separated from the tab bar in the new design. Search is no longer supposed to be part of your tab bar, but its own separate floating icon. So let's create that. I am going to use SF Symbols. If you're on a Macintosh, and I've showed you this in previous tutorials, SF Symbols is an application you can download from the Apple Store in order to get access to the SF Pro icons, which are the icons used in the Apple UI kit and library or any Apple design. Search for the word search, and this is the icon that I want. It's the magnifying glass. So the best way to get this is I'm going to right click, copy symbol, then I'll come back to Figma, do Command V, and I pasted my symbol right here. In order to make a button out of this symbol, I'm going to click Shift A to apply auto layout on it. And I'm very quickly going to rename this frame. And now what I want to do is apply corner radius just so that my button has a circular shape. So with my button search selected, under appearance, this is where I can apply the corner radius. And for this to become more visible, I'm giving it a fill for now. Let it be this blue. And you can see 64 corner radius has made it circular. I don't need this fill. Instead, what we want to do is we want to take our liquid glass background and place it inside of this button. So Command C, I will come inside my button and then click Command V. Because this is an auto layout, it got placed under it. If you see, if I select the auto layout button, it has placed them right next to each other because this is a horizontal auto layout. That's not what I want. I actually want this background to be in absolute positioning so I can place it as I please. I will select the liquid glass. Under position, here in this corner, you will see if you hover on this, this is called ignore auto layout, or it used to be called previously absolute positioning. So if I click on it, Figma understands I don't want auto layout to be applied to this layer. So I want this to be behind. I want the icon to be on top. Of course, I don't want to see that whole object. I definitely don't want the stroke that we've applied to that liquid glass. So I will go back to my button, select it. If I click on clip content, I'll be able to clip that liquid glass shape. I just wanted it to fill my component container. If you look closer here, in addition to the liquid glass applied to the background, Apple has created what feels like a stroke or inner shadow around each component to make it light up or have a certain border to stick from the content. So in order to replicate this, there is many ways you can do it. You can either do it with a stroke. Let's say we can use a white stroke and then play with that stroke, maybe make the stroke a gradient stroke. But that's not how I want to do it, so I'm going to remove the stroke. Instead, on the level of the button, let's apply an effect. And in this case, let's make it an inner shadow. And instead of black, we want to make it white and probably an opacity of 25%. And let's make it slightly smaller. So I'll give it a position of 1. Let's do another inner shadow. And this time, let's make it the opposite, -1. These two inner shadows, one -1 for below and 1 as for above. We can even increase the opacity if you want it to be more pronounced or reduce it. This button is definitely more visible. There are so many things that you can manipulate, but this is the basic action that allows you to get that liquid glass effect. Now let's repeat the same thing for the tab bar. For those of you who want to see how to create this from scratch. If this is for your first time using the UI kit, I suggest you go through this video I'm linking to you above, where you can actually go and learn how to do this from scratch in more details, how to connect to the UI library, how to install SF Pro and SF symbols in order to utilize it properly. So what started as this tab bar from the iOS UI kit, I've customized it. This is how you manipulate the number of tabs using SF symbols in order to replace the icons and reduced its size so the icons look centered. To apply the liquid glass to this tab bar, let's go to our file so we see our layers. Remember, we've detached from everything in order to be able to manipulate this. This is the background that is there. Now, I want to replace this background with the actual background that we've created. So once again, I'm going to click and Command Copy on liquid glass. I'm going to come here inside this. I'm going to select the background, and instead of clicking Command V, I want to replace it. So I will click Command Shift R and I will make my shape bigger, selecting the tab bar on iPhone, I will click Clip Content, and now we've clipped that additional shape. One additional step that you want to do so that things are responsive, do you see the constraints right here? You want this liquid glass background to be constrained to all sides of your tab bar so that it moves with it as you add things and reduce things. I think we want to increase the fill a little bit on it, the opacity of the white, and you can see I'm using the UI kit to change the actual colors so they are more prominent on the liquid glass because it's no longer gray. And with my tab bar selected, let's add multiple inner shadows just to make this component much more visible. Once again, for that, you need to go to Effects. I'm leaving it as 100% here. And then I will create a second inner shadow, and this time I'll just make it -1 to get the bottom inner shadow. You can play with this as you please just to see how it feels. We want the search symbol itself to be white to match the other ones. And there you have it. This is our liquid glass tab bar. I hope you found this video helpful. Please like, subscribe, or comment with anything else you would like me to teach you. Thank you so much for supporting my journey.